You know what kills me about Group B rally cars? It's not that they were dangerous, it's not that they killed people, it's that we knew exactly what we were doing when we built them, and we did it anyway. The MG Metro 6R4, though? This one's different. This one got banned not because it was too fast or too dangerous, but because it committed the ultimate sin in motorsport. It was too clever. Picture this for a second. It's 1984, and while Audi's shoving massive turbos onto everything that moves, while Peugeot's making their 205 scream like a banshee, and while Lancia's basically strapping drivers to guided missiles, some absolute madmen in Britain sit down and say, "You know what, lads? Let's take a shopping cart and make it eat Quattros for breakfast." I mean, come on, the Austin Metro, your nan's car, the thing you learned to drive in. They took that and created something so violent, so thoroughly unhinged, that even Group B, the category that literally killed its own drivers, said, "Whoa there, mate, steady on." Never heard of the 6R4? That's probably because it barely got to race before they pulled the plug on the whole Group B circus. But here's where things get interesting. While everyone else was following the turbo religion like it was gospel, MG went completely the other way. No turbos. No four-wheel drive system borrowed from a road car. Just pure, naturally aspirated fury wrapped in a fiberglass shell that looked like a Metro on every steroid known to man. The thing that gets me about the Metro 6R4 is how it started. This wasn't some skunkworks project by racing enthusiasts. No, this came from the top. British Leyland, a company that couldn't build a reliable road car if their lives depended on it, suddenly decided they needed to go rallying. And not just any rallying. Group B rallying. The formula that made Formula One look like a health and safety seminar. Williams Grand Prix Engineering got the call. Yes, that Williams. Frank Williams and Patrick Head, the guys who would go on to dominate Formula One, were handed a Metro and told to make it competitive in Group B. Imagine getting that brief. Here's a car that makes 60 horsepower on a good day, weighs about as much as a packet of crisps, and has the structural integrity of wet cardboard. Make it beat the Audi Quattro. Oh, and you've got about 18 months. Good luck. What they created was nothing short of miraculous, or terrifying, depending on your perspective. They threw out everything, and I mean everything. The entire car was redesigned from scratch. The only thing it shared with the road-going Metro was roughly the same silhouette, and even that's being generous. The 6R4 was about as related to a standard Metro as I am to my third cousin, twice removed. Let's talk about that name for a second. 6R4. Sounds like a robot from a bad sci-fi film, right? It stood for 6-cylinder, rear engine, four-wheel drive, simple, functional, British. But that simplicity hid something magnificent. While everyone else was bolting turbos to their engines and dealing with lag that could measure in geological time, Williams went naturally aspirated. The engine, oh the engine, this is where it gets properly mental. They took a V6, destroked it to 3 liters to meet regulations, and mounted it backwards in the middle of the car, not the front, not even the back, like a 911. Right in the middle, where the rear seats used to be. This V6 wasn't some off-the-shelf unit either. It was derived from the Rover V8, itself a development of the old Buick aluminum V8 from the 60s. They essentially chopped 2 cylinders off, added 4 valves per cylinder, and created something that screamed to 9,000 RPM, 410 horsepower, from 3 liters, naturally aspirated. In 1985, let that sink in for a moment. The contemporary Ferrari 308 made about 240 horses from the same displacement. The 6R4 almost doubled that, and this was going into a car that originally came with a 1-liter engine making all of 45 horsepower. But here's where Williams's genius really showed. Everyone else in Group B was fighting turbo lag. You know, that delay between putting your foot down and actually going anywhere, while the turbo spools up. In rallying, where you're constantly on and off the throttle, turbo lag could kill you. Literally. The 6R4 had none of that. Instant power, immediate response, put your foot down and it went. No waiting, no drama, just immediate, violent acceleration. The four-wheel drive system was equally clever. Instead of using a system from a road car like Audi did with their Quattro, Williams designed their own from scratch. 3 differentials, including a Ferguson-Viscous coupling center diff that could vary torque distribution automatically. This was space-age stuff in 1985, the kind of technology that wouldn't become common in road cars for another decade. Weight distribution was perfect too, 50-50 front to rear. That's supercar territory. Actually, that's better than most supercars. They achieve this by mounting everything in the middle. Engine, gearbox, fuel tank, all clustered around the car's center of gravity. The driver and navigator sat slightly forward of all this mechanical mayhem, probably wondering what they'd done to deserve this. The bodywork was pure function over form. Every bulge, every vent, every weird protrusion served a purpose. Those massive box arches that made it look like it was suffering from some kind of automotive elephantiasis. They covered wheels and tires so wide, the car looked like it was squatting. The huge air intakes behind the doors, feeding that hungry V6. The bizarre-looking rear wing that seemed to sprout from nowhere. Downforce. Everything was about going faster. Inside was even more extreme. No carpets, no sound deadening, no anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Just a roll cage, 2 racing seats, and enough instruments to land a Boeing. The noise must have been extraordinary. A naturally aspirated V6 at 9,000 RPM, straight-cut gears whining like a banshee, rocks and gravel pinging off the underbody. The drivers communicated using an intercom system, and even then they probably had to shout. Testing began in early 1985, and immediately the 6R4 started setting tongues wagging. Tony Pond, British rallying legend, and the man chosen to lead the development, was lapping the test track faster than anything else. Not just faster than the other Group B cars, faster than everything. The theoretical performance was off the charts. But then, as always with British engineering, came the problems. The first issue was heat. That mid-mounted engine turned the cockpit into a mobile oven. Drivers were literally cooking. They tried everything. Extra vents, heat shields, special suits. Nothing really worked. You just had to accept that driving a 6R4 meant accepting third-degree burns as an occupational hazard. Then there was the gearbox. The original plan was to use a 5-speed manual, but the power and torque kept destroying them. They'd last about 1 stage before turning into expensive paperweights. Williams eventually developed a stronger 6-speed unit, but reliability remained an issue throughout the car's short life. The Ferguson 4-wheel drive system, revolutionary as it was, also proved temperamental. The viscous coupling would overheat on long stages, effectively turning the car into rear-wheel drive. Imagine that. You're flat out through a Welsh forest, trusting the 4-wheel drive to keep you on the road, and suddenly half your traction disappears. No warning, no gradual degradation. Just suddenly, you're in a rear-wheel drive rocket ship with 400 horsepower. But perhaps the biggest problem was timing. The 6R4 made its competition debut at the RAC Rally in November 1985. By this point, Group B was already under scrutiny. The cars were too fast. The crowds were getting too close. People were dying. Henri Toivonen and his co-driver Sergio Cresto had been killed in their Lancia Delta S4 just months earlier. The writing was on the wall. Despite all this, the 6R4 showed promise. Tony Pond finished third on its debut, beaten only by the works Peugeots. Not bad for a brand-new car going up against machines that had been developed for years. The potential was obvious. Given time, this thing could have been a world beater. The 1986 season started promisingly. The 6R4 was getting faster. The reliability issues were being solved one by one. Pond was regularly finishing in the points. But then came Portugal, the rally that killed Group B. The Portuguese rally of 1986 was chaos from start to finish. The crowds were out of control. People were standing on the racing line, jumping out of the way at the last second. It was only a matter of time before disaster struck. When Joaquim Santos crashed his Ford RS200 into the crowd, killing 3 spectators and injuring dozens more, it was over. Group B was dead. The FIA announced that 1986 would be Group B's last season. From 1987, the new Group A regulations would take over. Smaller engines, less power, production-based cars. Everything Group B wasn't. The 6R4, barely a year old, was obsolete. But here's where the story gets really interesting. What do you do with 200 rally cars that can't rally anymore? Austin Rover, in a moment of genius or madness, depending on your perspective, decided to sell them to the public. The Clubman version, a slightly detuned variant making about 250 horsepower, was offered for £20,000. That's about 60 grand in today's money for a Metro that could out-accelerate a Ferrari. They sold all 200, every single one. Some went to private collectors who stuck them in garages and forgot about them. Others went to racers who used them in rallycross, where their instant power delivery made them devastating. A few mad bastards actually used them on the road. Imagine that. Popping down to Tesco in a Group B rally car. The V6 engine found a second life, too. Tom Walkinshaw Racing took the design, bored it out to 3.5 liters, and stuck it in the back of the Jaguar XJ220. Yes, that's right. One of the world's most expensive supercars was powered by an engine that started life in a Metro. They also used versions of it in powerboat racing, where it dominated for years. The technology Williams developed for the 6R4 didn't go to waste either. The lessons learned about four-wheel drive systems, weight distribution, and packaging would influence their Formula One cars for years to come. You could argue that the 6R4 was partly responsible for Williams's dominance in the early 90s. What really gets me about the 6R4 is what it represented. This was British engineering at its finest and most foolhardy, taking something mundane, something utterly ordinary, and transforming it into something extraordinary. It was 2 fingers up to the establishment. While the Germans were being all efficient and the Italians were being all passionate, the Brits were in a shed somewhere, creating a monster from spare parts and determination. The 6R4 proved you didn't need turbos to be fast. It proved you didn't need a massive budget to be competitive. It proved that sometimes, just sometimes, the underdog could bite back. Sure, it never won a world championship, it barely got the chance to compete. But in its brief moment in the spotlight, it showed what was possible. You know what the real tragedy is? We'll never know how good the 6R4 could have been. By the time they'd sorted the reliability issues, Group B was done. The development curve was just starting to flatten out. Another year, maybe 2, and who knows? We might be talking about the 6R4 the same way we talk about the Quattro or the 205 T16. Instead, it became a footnote, a curiosity, that weird British Group B car that looked like a Metro on steroids. Most people have never heard of it. Even among rally fans, it's often forgotten, overshadowed by the Lancias and Peugeots that actually won things. But for those who know, the 6R4 represents something special. It's the last gasp of an era when anything was possible. When a small team of engineers could take a shopping trolley and turn it into something that could worry the world's best. When innovation mattered more than money. When rallying was about brave pills and big balls, not corporate sponsorship and risk assessment. The ban wasn't really about the 6R4 specifically. It was about what it represented, the arms race that Group B had become, the speeds that were being reached, the risks that were being taken. The 6R4 was just caught in the crossfire, a victim of its own success, you might say. But in a weird way, the ban might have been the best thing that happened to the 6R4. It preserved it in amber, forever young, forever full of potential. We never got to see it fail, never got to see it become ordinary. It remains frozen at that moment of infinite possibility. Today, 6R4s are worth serious money. The few genuine works cars that survive change hands for 6 figures. Even the Clubman versions are climbing in value. They've become rolling pieces of history, reminders of when motorsport was properly dangerous and probably a bit stupid. Driving one today must be an experience. No power steering, no ABS, no traction control, no safety nets whatsoever, just you, 400 horsepower, and whatever skills you think you have. It's the automotive equivalent of wrestling a tiger. Exciting, certainly. Survivable, possibly. Advisable, definitely not. The noise alone would be worth it, though. That naturally aspirated V6 at full chat is one of the great sounds in motorsport, a howl that builds and builds until you think it can't possibly rev any higher, and then it does. No turbo whistle, no wastegate chatter, just pure mechanical fury. Would it have dominated if Group B had continued? Honestly, probably not. The Peugeot 205 T16 Evolution 2 was reaching new levels of speed. Lancia was developing the Delta S4 Evolution. Audi had the Sport Quattro S1 E2. The competition was fierce and getting fiercer. The 6R4 would have needed massive development to keep up. But that's not really the point, is it? The 6R4 wasn't about winning, not really. It was about showing up, about proving that Britain could still play with the big boys, about taking something humble and making it heroic. In that sense, it succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. The spiritual successors to the 6R4 are obvious when you think about it. The Subaru Impreza WRX, the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution, regular cars transformed into rally weapons. The formula works. It's just that nobody's quite had the balls to do it like MG did, to take something so utterly basic and make it so utterly extreme. Modern rallying is faster than Group B ever was. The cars are quicker, safer, more reliable, but they lack something, that raw edge, that sense of barely controlled chaos, the feeling that at any moment everything could go spectacularly wrong. The 6R4 had that in spades. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Group B had survived. If the 6R4 had been given time to mature, would naturally aspirated engines have made a comeback? Would other manufacturers have followed MG's lead? Would we have seen even more extreme machines? But then I remember Portugal 1986, the crowds, the crashes, the deaths. Group B had to die. It was too much. The 6R4 and its ilk were too fast for their own good, too fast for the technology of the time, too fast for human beings to control reliably. The ban was inevitable. The only surprise is that it took so long. The 6R4 just had the misfortune of arriving at the party just as the police were shutting it down, all dressed up with nowhere to go. A warrior without a war. Maybe that's the real lesson of the 6R4, that sometimes you can be too good, too fast, too clever. That innovation isn't always rewarded, that timing matters more than talent. It's a bitter pill, but an important one. The legacy lives on, though. Every time an engineer takes something ordinary and makes it extraordinary. Every time someone says that can't be done and someone else proves them wrong. Every time the underdog bites back. That's the spirit of the 6R4. In the end, the MG Metro 6R4 wasn't banned because it was too wild. It was banned because the entire formula was too wild. It was just another casualty of Group B's excesses. But what a casualty, what a machine, what a story. So next time you see a Metro, probably rusting away in someone's garden, remember what it could have been. Remember that for one brief shining moment, that humble shopping trolley was transformed into something magnificent. Something that could run with the world's best. Something that proved British engineering wasn't dead. The 6R4 deserved better. It deserved a proper chance. It deserved to race, to win, to fail on its own terms. Instead, it became a what if, a might have been, a reminder of rallying's most extreme era. But perhaps that's enough. Perhaps being remembered as the car that was too clever for its own good is better than being forgotten entirely. The MG Metro 6R4 may not have conquered the world, but it conquered something more important. It conquered our imaginations. And in the end, Isn't that what the best racing cars do? The truth about why the 6R4 was banned isn't shocking at all. It's mundane, bureaucratic, a line drawn under an era that had spiraled out of control. But the car itself, that remains shocking. That a Metro could be transformed into something so extreme still beggars belief nearly 40 years later. And that really is the 6R4's greatest achievement, not the rallies it won or the records it set, but the simple fact that it existed at all, that someone looked at an Austin Metro and thought, yeah, we can make that into a Group B car. That takes a special kind of madness, the good kind, the kind we don't see enough of anymore. The MG Metro 6R4 wasn't too wild for rally. Rally was too wild for the world. The 6R4 was just wild enough to be remembered, wild enough to be missed, wild enough to remind us what we lost when Group B died. And maybe, just maybe, that's worth more than any championship could ever be.